This video is about the US invasion of Panama, also called Operation Just Cause. Operation Just Cause started on the 20th of December 1989. It lasted a bit longer than a month. US President was George Bush and the dictator in Panama was Manuel Noriega. The prehistory. In 1914, the Panama Canal was opened and the canal zone was placed under US control. The Panama Canal was and still is strategically of massive importance because it shortens the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific and vice versa massively. In 1977, it was agreed that Panama would take control over the canal zone in the year 2000, but there's a condition that US ships will not face any restrictions. In 1983, Manuel Noriega promoted himself to general and then was the dictator of Panama, the head of state, even though he never had any title like president or so. The relationship between the United States and Noriega were very ambivalent because Noriega supported the CIA in Latin America, but on the other hand, he was heavily involved in drug trafficking. Now, the relationship US-Noriega should not get better. In February 1988, Noriega was indicted in the US because of drug offenses, and the same year he was looking to find new friends in the Eastern Bloc. That is definitely alarming, or that was alarming the US, and the Pentagon had the first plans for an invasion. In May 1989, there was the election in Panama. Noriega lost, but he said, I don't care. I just carry on as I did before. I continue with my dictatorship. The US increased the military presence in the canal zone, and the Panamanian parliament, controlled by Noriega, declared this is effectively a state of war. Now the event that eventually led to the invasion, a few Panamanian soldiers and civilians fired on US officers and they killed one. And then President Bush said, I had enough, and he ordered the invasion for the 20th of December. On the 20th of December at 0100 hours, Operation Just Cause started. Firstly, there were airstrikes, then special forces and other ground forces took strategic positions, especially around the canal zone. And finally, the war was over. In a few places, it took a few weeks. On the first day of the Operation Just Cause, Guillermo Endara, the winner of the May election, was sworn into office. And 31st of January 1990, President Bush declared that the Operation Just Cause had ended. Now, very important was the capture of Noriega. With the start of the operation, with the first day, SEAL Team 4 was tasked with Operation Nifty Package. They should capture Noriega. Noriega could flee into the embassy of the Holy See, and there he was surrounded by US troops, and they initiated psychological warfare. For instance, they were playing loud rock music around the clock 24/7 to wear Noriega down. Eventually, he surrendered and was flown to the United States, where he was brought to court. The consequences. The UN General Assembly condemned the US invasion, and the American countries were not very happy. Peru even withdrew her ambassador from Washington. There was massive support in the US population and also in Panama, but the Panamanian support is disputed because the polls bringing out this result, they could have had some flaws with their methodology. Anyway, Noriega was brought to the US, convicted before a US court for drug trafficking, and also later he faced indictments in France and Panama. Approximately 20,000 Panamanians lost their homes during the invasion. There was massive destructions and massive harm to the Panamanian economy. Panama was a democracy then, but there was a limited freedom of press. That was the Operation Just Cause in 5.